This is Branko Malic from Kali Tribune with the second part in the series of podcasts named Science Sought for Aristotle and the Problem of Metaphysics. In this part, we'll proceed to explore book Gamma of Metaphysics. Now, it is in fact a crucial treatise in the compendium of Aristotle's Metaphysics, not only to understand Aristotle's philosophy and what we nowadays call Aristotle's metaphysics, first philosophy, but to, in a way, give us an opportunity to experience the viewpoint of Aristotle, or even better to say, to adjust ourselves to the world in which he lived in. Because if you really seriously study Aristotle, and if you have a good translation of Aristotle, which means it is the more difficult to read the translation is, the more accurate probably it is too, because Aristotle's treatises and his language are very sparse, very dry, and very they have a very ugly stylistic form in translation. Many translations I read in English kinda sacrifice accuracy to in a way make the text more accessible, and this is unfortunately not good for understanding Aristotle. Now, why I say we can understand Aristotle's world, it's not only Aristotle's world, it's ancient world in general. It's because the way he speaks and thinks, if we closely follow his thoughts, we'll soon realize that in order to understand him, we have to change our mentality to adjust it to his. Because he takes for granted things we don't not only take for granted, but deem illusory, while he obviously ignores and deems illusory the things we take for granted. And this is very important. And as Metaphysics is a foundational book of what we might call Western tradition, encompassing by this Christian tradition too, that means a religious tradition, probably to some extent an Islam tradition. It is a civilization. It is a civilization, not civilization building book, but one of the main blocks in building of Western civilization, insofar as we can still call it a civilization, which is very discutable. And a very important segment of this foundational character of metaphysics is what we would nowadays call Aristotle's ontology, and that is what he calls a theory, or a science of being, insofar it is a being, or as some put it, being qua being. It is the subject of 3 books of metaphysics, Gamma, Epsilon, and Kappa. We'll talk about Gamma, which is probably the most precise and the most and abundant with content, very interesting and very instructive content. Now, this, as we said, metaphysics, whole book of metaphysics is concerned with search for a specific kind of science, or as Aristotle sometimes puts it, a specific kind of philosophy. And as we already said, he calls it first philosophy, wisdom, or in some places theology. The science of being, insofar is a being, it is a being, is maybe the central, let's say 50% of the central part of metaphysics, and takes us perhaps closest to understanding what it means to have or to realize a metaphysical knowledge. We'll try to stick closely to the text, because as I said before, the very form of Aristotle's expression can make sense to us only if we adjust to the mentality of the world, which is not longer ours. And what I mean by this will become, I think, very clear after we make a few examples and inferences. So I'll quote the first passage of the book Gamma. It is in translation of Joseph Owens, was a Canadian philosopher and Jesuit priest, very, very knowledgeable about Aristotle and very good translator. So, I quote, "There is a science which considers being qua being." That means being insofar it is being. And what belongs to it per se. Now this is not the same as any of what are called the particular sciences, for none of these others treats universally of being qua being. They cut off a part of being and consider what happens to pertain to this part, as for instance the mathematical sciences do. End quote. So what Aristotle here says is, he doesn't put a question, he states a fact, and this is very important. There is a science which considers being insofar it is being, and what belongs to it per se. This is in Greek, this what belongs to it per se is one word, tuto hyparchonta. Hyparchonta, this word is a composite word of hip and arche, things that originate in a way, originally belong to this being qua being. Now what is it? It is a being insofar as it is not some particular being we encounter in the world. It is the being itself. So what is interesting here is that nowadays, if you start to speak about this being itself, all so-called modern contemporary philosophers will put the question, can we talk about being in general? And of course they very, very soon come to conclusion that we can't, mostly because they consider this a concept we extracted from experience. We in our life's experience, beings experience various events, happenings, accidents, deeds. We live in the world full of trees, buildings, and such, and all they are beings. The term being can denote every one of them. So modern logic is, well, this being is just a concept we constructed on the grounds of having a multiply beings, and in order to name everything that is with one common denominator, we invented word being, and this is it. This notion, this way of thinking, however, is completely modern. It started, I would say, with Kant, who said that being is no real predicate, which means that when you say that something is a being, you practically make what Kant called analytical judgment a priori. You made a judgment inference in which the predicate is a part of the subject. The best example of such judgment would be uh, 1 equals 1, or A is identical with A, or I am I, and such tautological inferences. So this is an inference that is always true, but has no content, has no real, has nothing, no reality. It is superfluous in a way. And after Kant, after many various permutations derived from his philosophical revolution, you have in 20th century analytical philosophy. One of their main exponents was Ludwig Wittgenstein, who tried to prove that not only these terms as being are concepts, they are not even that. They are nonsensical, tautological concepts that come from misuse of language. So the being the term being comes from deficiency of everyday language, taking something from language as real. Now, let's read what Aristotle says. There is a science which considers being qua being, and what belongs to it per se. There is no question about it in his mind. And Aristotle almost always starts his inquiries with the question. He has this this way of thinking in circle where he posits the question, in a way examines what are common notions about the subject, for instance, when he talks about political virtue. So what people deem virtues or good in politics. Then he criticizes, tries to refine these notions and moves from them to his own inquiry, and then returns to see what he got right and what he got wrong, or what his predecessors got right or what his predecessors got wrong. This is how he usually proceeds. That's his methodology. Well, there he says there is a being qua being, and this hyperhontas is very this per se. Hyperhontas means that he considers that there are attributes of this being which are peculiar to it. That is to say, it is not a concept, it is not a word, it is a reality. It is a reality which is present in every instance of being. It is present in nature, obviously, it is present in thinking, it is present in language, it is present in everyday life, but not as itself. It is present everywhere, every time we said that something is. And he says that being is a reality. This is completely diametrically opposed to the way we nowadays think. Now, it may seem that those are very abstract and a lot of questions not related to everyday life. However, they are very related to our everyday lives. And we, at least what you call normal and average people, average Joes and Janes, most of us deep down inside think this way. Because you know what? This means, this Aristotle sentence is affirmation, ultimate affirmation of the reality of the world. Our science, contemporary science, or better to say, scientism, philosophy, or theology, even better to say, of modern science do not share this opinion with us. It does not deem it real. What I mean by this, I will try to explain better later. Now, as Aristotle says, this science he's looking for, science sought for, that's metaphysics. It's not the same as any of what are called the particular sciences. For none of these treats universally of being qua being. So, it is not mathematics, it is not astronomy, it is not biology. Well, in his time, he's the first, practically the first to make the methodological division or generic division of sciences into branches in West. He's the first man to do it, but science is for him what he deems physics. It's got nothing to do what we nowadays call physics. And same goes for theology and, well, mathematics. I think his mathematics was pretty mainstream. He didn't think highly of mathematics, and metaphysics, or the science sought for here, is none of them. And here's why. I quote again: they cut off a part of being and consider what happens to pertain to this part, as for instance the mathematical sciences do. So, they in a way separate some attribute of this being qua being in general, and considers that part. So mathematics does with the being as number, or physics, physica, Aristotle's physica deals with beings with intrinsic principle of motion or process, which calls kinesis. And physics or physica, metaphysica, is second philosophy for Aristotle, deutera philosophia. So he's now looking for first philosophy, and physics is very closely related to it as a second philosophy, because Aristotle considers the world to be a continuum. Maybe it's not good to say continuum, aggregate of processes of movement, kinesis. Kinesis is usually translated as movement, but process is better word, because for instance, making logical inference for Aristotle is a form of kinesis. It's a process. It's from A to B, continuous movement from A to B. It does not have to be spatial movement. Spatial movement is arguable. Is it really the first kind of movement Aristotle would affirm? And these beings of nature, which are intrinsically moved, they have principle of movement in themselves, and this is more or less identical with the principle of form. They all consist of matter. They have a matter as constituent, and this makes them finite. And there are beings that are not finite, and they are not consisted of matter. And those are the beings metaphysics of first philosophy inquires about. But they are closely related, because Aristotle's principle is that all our knowledge comes through senses. But this does not mean that we only have knowledge of sensible individuals, that is some imaginary, purely empirical knowledge. This is not the standpoint that Aristotle would endorse in any kind of way. In fact, excuse me, he takes opportunity to criticize precisely this standpoint in the Gamma book of Metaphysics, and this his criticism of this standpoint that all knowledge is sensual knowledge is in fact very, very enlightening, and we'll talk about it in the next podcast. Namely, the fact that all knowledge temporarily, or so to speak, in temporal sequence, first comes to us through senses, doesn't mean it is sensual knowledge, that it is knowledge of sensibles. We are in effect limited by our five senses, but things which we know and which we become conscious of, and which we try to figure out in our thinking, are in their essence or in their causes, in fact, not bound by matter. Namely, the causes of physical things are not material causes. This is very important. Ultimately, not material. So Aristotle says the things that are first for us are the last in themselves, while the things that are last for us are first in themselves. This in themselves means that they are, as a reality, as beings, more real than the things we first encounter in the temporal sequence of cognition. So sensible things seem to be first for us because it is very not easy. It is a completely effortless act to see something, to feel something, to smell something. But the act of thinking, which comes only in people who try to develop, or as Aristotle would say, actualize, energize their mind, can grasp the reality which is beyond sensible. And this reality is in itself the first, because it is the reality of causes. Now, just to when we're talking about causes, Aristotle recognizes four causes that science or episteme has to inquire about. Those are so-called formal cause, the final cause, the material cause, and the efficient cause. Now, Aristotle talks about them in the form of questions. For instance, this final, what we nowadays call final cause, is hu heneka, because of what? This is the answer to this. When you find the cause, why is something, then you can further infer what it is, what caused it to be, and of what it is made. The final cause for Aristotle is the first cause. Now, in modern science, final causes are something that is not inquired at all. And one might say that a modern outlook, modern scientific, and let's call it so, philosophical outlook, takes a diametrically opposed principle, opposed approach. Now, these four causes, for instance, material cause is from what or of what is something constituent. But you can't use this cause if you can make no heads or tails of this cause. If you don't know what is a form of a thing, that's a formal cause, and form for Aristotle is the answer what is, TST, what the thing is. And today we call, in Latinizing the Greek philosophy in early Middle Ages, this answer to question TST, or what is, became substantia, or substance. Original Greek word is ousia. Now, ousia is what some being eminently is. For instance, for Aristotle, I, Branko, am ousia. I am the substance in some sense, because everything you say about me is predicated to me, while I am not predicated to nothing. So, if you want to inquire about me, I will always be the subject of inquiry, and other of my attributes, so to speak, and the things I do or do not do, my aesthetic qualities or ethical qualities or opposites thereof, they are always predicated to this substance that is me. But I am just an individual in the world. Aristotle is interested, and here in a Gamma book of Metaphysics, with a being which is not individual in a sense. For instance, I am individual, or this computer on which I record this podcast is an individual substance. It is something else, and this is very, very interesting dialectical relation which he puts here, because he's talking about a being which is predicable to any being conceivable. He talks about it in a terms of it being a reality. So that's what we saw from his quotation from the first passage of Gamma book. And at the same time, Aristotle posits that all science is a science of ousia, or substance, or as Joseph Owens translates it, entity. This is the answer to a question, what is? So the being, insofar it's a being, must be, on the one hand, absolutely general being, that is absolutely all-encompassing instance of reality, and on the other hand, it must be absolutely individual, in a sense that it is absolutely, please mark my word, unique. Because when we come to individuals in Aristotle, I hate this word, but it is mostly used in English. Individual for Aristotle is not pure sensible thing, what analytical philosophers, so-called analytical, as Bertrand Russell would call atomic fact. There is no such thing as an atomic fact. The individual, for instance, to take me for example again, if I'm a substance, I'm an individual. I'm not purely, I'm not atomic fact. I'm abundantly meaningful being with life's history, with person, with body, with thoughts, with memories, with genetics, with ancestry. The fact that makes me individual is this uniqueness, in a way, a relative uniqueness. And for Aristotle's logic, a way of thinking, everything is unique in some sense. This is diametrically opposed to our postmodern mind. Diametrically opposed. And the reason is because knowledge for Aristotle is never pure sensual knowledge, and he is completely right. This is no theory, this is simply a fact. Some people, very interestingly, cannot see this fact. Some people are fooled into thinking that all our knowledge is pure sensuality, and then we process it in our brain, and we make concepts, we make non-sensual thing by non-sensual means, and Well, then they have the problem of explaining how these non-sensual things can have reality at all, and they do have a reality, and we must always, when we are thinking, talking, arguing, we must presuppose the reality of our concepts. And if our concepts are only a smoke circling from the sensual thing, some kind of mist upon the world of sensual reality, unreal mist, then there is no foundation for anything, for truth, lie, dialogue, anything. In the next podcast, we'll go a little deeper than into this. The being qua being, or being insofar it is a being, is completely unique. It is real and it is all encompassing. And now we come to something very important. Our notion, when we hear this notion that there is this being in general, the very word general makes us think that this being is a genera, that it is the genera, that being is genera of all beings. Because in Aristotle, of course, in Aristotle's logic and his notion of methodical knowledge, this is something today called epistemology. I don't use this word because Aristotle didn't use it. He doesn't have epistemology. He has inquiry into methodical knowledge, or methodical inquiry of an inquiry. Well, every science is determined by genera it deals with. So physics deals with genera of sensible substances, or better to say substances, as I said before, substances that have the intrinsic cause of movement or process. Better to say causes, trying to find the causes of these substances or entities. And those are four causes which we mentioned earlier, and every science has to inquire in the schemata of these four causes. And for instance, you have mathematics, which is for Aristotle a kind of science of beings which are not material, but they are abstract, not in the sense of Platonic forms or ideas, which are abstract in the sense that they are not material, they are before matter. For us, Aristotle, numbers are abstractions in the sense that we make them. He was not very fond of mathematics. Well, that's the question in itself. And then you have, for instance, the science of ethics. Ethics is not a science; it is practical science. He has this excuse me, this division of sciences: theoretical, practical, and poetical, in the terms of the strictness required for and the accuracy their methods can provide us with. And ethics, for instance, concerns the genera of human acts, of good human acts, and the causes of them, of how to cause good acts, how they come about, what is virtue, what is good, what is bad, and so on. So every science deals with different genera, and what Aristotle hated the most, with full right, was something he called metabasis eisalo genera. That means jumping into other genera. For instance, this is when you are a mathematician and you want to do ethics, theory of human morality, and you use mathematical methods. And Aristotle would say, you are missing the genera. You are dealing with the wrong genera, and you screwed up. Scientists of today, and I mean scientists which have audacity to think themselves philosophers, like Richard Dawkins, for instance, are doing this on the daily basis. That's unbelievable what they are doing. They are completely unaware of this fact that method is not something method in inquiry, scientific methodical inquiry is not something we make up. It's something we discover. It's something the reality forces us to choose. They don't get this. And they for instance, go into polemics, theological arguments where they try to calculate probability of existence of God, which is completely out of touch with what theology is. They can, for instance, they can say theology is meaningless, as Wittgenstein would say, and shut up about it. But they don't do that. They try to figure out the absolute by the means of finite, of statistics, of probably most unreliable branch of mathematics. They apply category of quantity on something that has no quantity, because if there is God or there is no God, you can't say there is such and such certainty there is God, because this quantity of events goes to show that probably there is God, and this quantity of events goes to show that he probably does not exist. This is unbelievably crude, and what is worse, it is completely ahistorical. That indicates that those people, in their thinking, if that can be called thinking, are trying to start constantly acting as nobody before them has done this, as there was no civilization before them. This is very important, because this relying of authority, for instance, of Aristotle, is not relying on Aristotle as a person, trying not to think with your own head, but with Aristotle's head. It is relying on civilizational heritage in which you live and on which you have to rely, because Aristotle relied on it too. And he developed one kind of um, one mode of this civilization, very important one. And to get back to this genera of science question, this is very important. People think, for instance, that this being in general is therefore a genera of being, but it is not. Aristotle says it is not a genera, because for Aristotle, genera denotes matter. Not in every sense, but in this sense is, because matter is for Aristotle always formed matter. It is a possibility of a form. And every genera of being has a differently formalized matter, because in Aristotle form is an active principle. Nowadays we think of form as something formal, empty. He thinks diametrically opposed. For him, form is the energy, energia. It is actualization of something. And various modes of actualized matter denote various genera. And being is not the genera. It transcends the genera. So when we say, for instance, that I am being, this computer is being, my thoughts are being, does it mean the being is genera? What would it mean if we would affirm that being is genera? It would, among other things, mean that my thought, I, and this computer are made of matter formalized and formed in the same way, and we are not. We are something completely different. And this is very important thing. This is very important thing. Being, this means that being insofar is a being. the ontoson, as Greeks would say, the true being, is not material. It is very mysterious now. How can this being, qua being, exist? Because Aristotle just denotes there is a being qua being, and now we'll talk about this reality. We'll talk in next podcast about the cognitive faculty to which he ascribes this certainty of reality, of metaphysical reality. It's a fascinating thing. And now, what this being should be? And he says it is a proshen homonymia. Proshen means according to one, in relation to one. For Aristotle, homonymous words are the words that have that are same, but they can be accidentally same. For instance, we can say lively cat, or that something is lively painted. It is obvious that they have the same sound, but they have completely different meaning. They are not related to same general, same substance. In proshen homonymia or equivocity according to one, the words, the same word is used always in relation to one underlying nature or one underlying cause. So when he says, for instance, when we have the examples, I'll quote his passage about it. Being is expressed in many ways, but proshen, that means according to one, that is, in reference to one definite nature, and not equivocally, but as is also, for instance, healthy. Everything which is healthy is referred to health. One thing in the sense that it preserves health, another in the sense that it produces it, another in the sense that it is a symptom of health, another because it is susceptible to it. And that which is medical is referred to medical art. One thing being called medical because it possesses it, another because it is naturally adapted to it, another because it is function of the medical art. End quote. So this being is expressed in many ways. Tohon legetai polachos in Greek. That's famous Aristotle's dictum, very important. Being is expressed, is said in many ways. He don't say we denote being. He said being is expressed in a way. Aristotle presupposes that things themselves are talking and expressing themselves. And what is this proshen in the instance of healthy? For all healthy things refer to health in itself. Health is this one nature to which they, as he says, nature, to one first instance, the first according to which everything is called healthy or not healthy. So completely disparate things from medicines to healthy looks. And this is the way every individual being relates to the being qua being, or being insofar it is a being. We will stop now, and in the next podcast we'll proceed to show how we acquire spontaneously and in everyday experience the knowledge of this being insofar as it is a being, of this, in effect, ultimate reality. Thank you for your attention.